Spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV up through the end of Shadowbringers. If I were to describe Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers in a single word, it would be melancholy. There are moments of levity, of course, and there are moments of exciting, over-the-top action, but throughout the entire main scenario of Shadowbringers, I can never shake this feeling of a distant sadness. An unspoken truth that whatever victories you may find, there's no bringing back the people who are gone. Shadowbringers is not a story about a world on the brink of destruction, like Endwalker is. Shadowbringers is a story about a world that's already been destroyed. The apocalypse came and went 100 years ago, and now the broken people who have already lost everything have to figure out how to pick up the pieces, how to survive in an unsustainable, dying world. At one point in Shadowbringers, late in the game, you get a quest objective that simply reads, "Take a moment to feel the wind upon your face." It's just that kind of game. A reminder that, though things may be dire, though it may already seem too late, in this moment you can feel. At this moment you can think. In this moment you are alive. And that's all you can ever count on. There's a lot going on in the story of Shadowbringers. It's going to be the topic of more than one video. Much like Endwalker, there's simply too much going on for just one video. Last time I made one of these Final Fantasy videos, I teased that the next topic I touched would be Emet-Selch, my favorite character in Final Fantasy XIV. My favorite character in Final Fantasy as a franchise overall, and a character who demonstrates that melancholy, nostalgic ache which defines Shadowbringers. That's true. I want to talk about Emet-Selch, but I don't just want to talk about Emet-Selch. I want to talk about the main theme of Shadowbringers as a whole: legacy. That's today's secret word. Make sure you scream as loud as you can when you hear it. Legacy. How will you be remembered when you're gone, and how do you remember others, those you've lost along the way? To do that, I want to talk about 3 different threads that run throughout the story of Shadowbringers, and how they examine this idea of legacy in 3 distinct ways. The story of Ardbert, the warrior of darkness, who could not control his own legacy. The story of the young Minfilia, who had to figure out how to navigate someone else's legacy. And, of course, the story of Emet-Selch, the founding father of Garlemald and so much more, who could not let go of the world he knew, who could not pass the torch to those who came after. So, I'm Zul'Dim, and please, join me as I talk about my favorite expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, and just why it's so special to me and many others. The story of Shadowbringers actually begins long before Shadowbringers itself does, way back in the patch content for Heavensward, the very first expansion to the relaunched version of the game released in 2015. If you haven't played the game before, we have to do some stage setting here. It's going to get a little proper nouny. Bear with me. When you finish the story of Heavensward itself, like all of the expansions, it ends with teasers about future content coming to the game. One of these teasers shows Elidibus, one of the Asians who have been pulling the strings behind the scenes of the various sinister plots of the game so far, talking to someone he calls the Warrior of Darkness on the moon. Before we go any further, I guess I have to quickly address this. It's really stupid, but I just don't want to get the same comment several hundred times pointing out that I reflexively say Asian with an ah sound and not Asian with an ah sound. So, real quick.
Asian. Asian. Asian.
And just to emphasize the point,
Asian Emet-Selchと申し上げる。
Asian. It's fine. It's a correct alternate pronunciation. This is literally a tomato-tomato situation. I'm not going to say it differently. Sometimes the same word has multiple pronunciations. Sometimes different people learn to speak in different regions and so emphasize syllables slightly differently. It's not a question of right and wrong pronunciation. They are literally both correct. It is great for engagement, though. It's why that Fandaniel video I made got 250,000 views in a year. So, please, leave your ill-conceived response about how I'm still wrong in the comments below. Just know that I am demonstrably right.
Asian.
This Warrior of Darkness is designed to be a clear contrast to the player character, the Warrior of Light. Not only does the name draw obvious parallels, but his design is specifically meant to evoke the default representation of the player character who shows up in the cinematics for each expansion. As the patch content moves on, you discover that there are actually 5 members of the Warriors of Darkness. Well, 6, but we're not going to be talking about Silva today. She'll come up in a different video. Each of these Warriors of Darkness appear as sort of stereotypical representations of different jobs the player can have in the game. Character classes like Paladin, Black Mage, Bard, and so on, with each wearing the default armor which their corresponding job gets at the end of their level 50 quests. Lamit is a Lalafell White Mage, Nilebert is an Elyzin Black Mage, Rendare is a Mikote Bard, Brandon is a Rogadin Paladin, and their leader, Ardbert, is a Hyur Warrior. All of these people have 2 names because it's Final Fantasy XIV, so everyone has a 2-name minimum, but I think it'll be too confusing to switch between saying Ardbert and Ardbert periodically, so I'm just going to call them by these names the whole time. The Warriors of Darkness initially have strange motives. Their actions are confusing. They travel across Eorzea, much like the Warrior of Light and the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, slaying primals, gods who are summoned by various tribes. First Ravana, then Garuda, and so on. Bosses you've spent A Realm Reborn and Heavensward taking out yourself. It makes it seem like these Warriors of Darkness should be on your side, but when you first encounter them, they attack, showing their nefarious intentions. Indeed, they continue to show hostile action against you, shooting your ally Alice with a poisoned arrow, and seemingly converting Urianger to their own side. Eventually you discover that they are behind the summoning of these primals. They then immediately slay as a part of Elidibus's schemes, with Elidibus secretly supplying the tribes of Eorzea an unlimited supply of the crystals required in these summoning rituals, and with the Warriors of Darkness slaying these gods as soon as they're summoned, they are causing an escalation, with each primal summoned by the tribes being progressively more powerful, a trend which will eventually lead the world straight toward calamity. Where this gets really interesting, though, is the Warriors of Darkness motivations. Eventually, we get a major lore dump, which explains that Final Fantasy XIV takes place in a sort of multiverse. Not an infinite multiverse, though, but one with exactly 14 worlds. At some point in the current world's prehistory, a great calamity struck the planet, which shattered it into 14 shards. Not just the world, the people were shattered, their souls divided across 14 worlds. The world we are familiar with is what remains of the original, dubbed the Source, with 13 reflections existing, unbeknownst to those on any of these worlds, dubbed the First, the Second, and so on up to the 13th. I tend to call the Ascians a cult for lack of a better description, but to be clear, in the world of Final Fantasy XIV, they're correct, at least factually. All of this is not just conjecture by the Ascians, not just their teachings, but fact. They are the only ones who have been aware of the true nature of the world and are, in their view, seeking to correct it. Until now, the Ascians' goals have been a mystery. They only seek to spread chaos and destruction in their wake by silently guiding the world towards calamities on a massive scale. The most well-known of these calamities is when Bahamut was released from the Lesser Moon of Dalamud by the Garlean Empire, which was the event which was used to justify the real-life shuttering of the original version of Final Fantasy XIV and the relaunch of the game as Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. This was actually the 7th such calamity which has struck the world, with the other 6 happening over the course of hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years, all the way back to before the recorded history of the world. Each was secretly masterminded by the Ascians. In truth, their intentions were not merely to sow discord and death. Each of these calamities, whether they take the form of natural disasters, terrible wars, or a giant dragon casting Terraflare, was powerful enough to sort of shock the world awake across these dimensional barriers, each triggering one of these reflections to be reabsorbed by the Source. By the time of A Realm Reborn, the 5th, the 12th, the 2nd, the 4th, the 6th, the 10th, and the 7th have all been rejoined to the Source in that order. In order for a world to be successfully rejoined, however, it's not enough to just cause a calamity on one end. Because of the way the Source and its reflections are connected, they need to cause a calamity within each of these worlds simultaneously, each aspected with a different element, and if the scales are tipped too far, then the rejoining won't work either. This is a lesson they learned the hard way by trying to brute force a rejoining on their first attempt, by simply flooding one of these worlds with an overwhelming amount of darkness, which, to be clear, in this universe is an elemental aspect like fire, water, or wind. This failed attempt destroyed that world, the 13th, and created what is now known as the Void, which is sort of this universe's analog for Hell. Not as an afterlife, mind, but as a place filled with powerful demons, or Voidsent as they're called, with the original inhabitants being transformed into things like succubi or imps. The Warriors of Darkness are the first characters we meet from another world, specifically hailing from the First. In their world, they were known as the Warriors of Light, working for the light goddess Hydaelyn, just like you are, fighting threats to their world, particularly 2 Ascians trying to guide that world towards disaster, named Logrief and Mitron, who really need to be the subjects of their own video. Put a pin in it. The Warriors of Light, as they were called in their own world, did a bit too good of a job ridding the world of darkness. After vanquishing threat after threat, when they slayed the Ascian Logrief, they had effectively tipped the scales too far against the darkness. Without enough darkness to keep it in check, they started a chain reaction, and light began to wash across the lands of the First, ravaging it in a great disaster known as the Flood. In this universe, light can be better described not just as literal light, but as order, and darkness is synonymous with chaos. This means it's like an order ending in a Shin Megami Tensei game. This flood of order destroying everything it touched, leaving nothing but bleached rock in its wake. After all, nothing is more perfectly ordered than a lifeless wasteland. This wasn't what the Oseans wanted either. Tipping the scales in a given world is a necessary part of their plan to rejoin it, but by tipping the balance too far, they wouldn't be able to rejoin the First. And as the flood slowly washed across the lands of the First, they risked it becoming a lost cause like the 13th is, except warped beyond recognition by light instead of by darkness. This is why the Warriors of Darkness have come to the Source. This is why they are now working with the Oseans, former enemies turned allies by a common cause. Neither group wants the Flood to destroy the First, and so because they are inherently connected, they are hoping that by causing chaos in the Source, they can counterbalance the abundance of order in the First before it's too far gone. It should almost go without saying, though, given the everything about the Oseans, that the Warriors of Darkness are being tricked here. The Warriors of Darkness now hold hatred in their hearts for Hydaelyn, the goddess of light, who you are working for throughout the game, and who they were working for when they fought for the Banner of Light. And that hatred is being manipulated by the Oseans, who worship the god of darkness, Zodiark. Put a pin in it, we'll talk more about Hydaelyn and Zodiark later on in this video. The Oseans do not have the ability to transport matter, the physical bodies of the Warriors of Darkness in this case, across worlds. They can only transport souls. As part of their deal with the devil, that is Elidibus, they took their own lives in order to come to the Source. Moreover, Elidibus doesn't want to counterbalance the First back to what it once was. He wants to balance the scales just right so that the First will be rejoined. And crucially, when a rejoining occurs, everyone living in that reflection will be killed. Not even just killed, but reabsorbed into their counterpart in the Source. The people of the Source will be better for it, stronger, smarter, and that's why the Oseans seek to do this, but at the cost of an entire world. Ardbert and his comrades are fighting, unwittingly, to destroy their own world. This storyline came to a head in patch 3.4, Soul Surrender, in a quest called One Life for One World. After a climactic showdown with the Warriors of Darkness in the Bowl of Embers, the same place fittingly where you fought your very first primal Ifrit, the goddess Hydaelyn speaks to you and to the Warriors of Darkness in the form of an emissary, an oracle. She shall go to the First to stop the Flood, and to thwart the Oseans' plans of rejoining. I love this line from Ardbert where you can hear his shock, his disbelief that Hydaelyn intervenes now after all they've been through.
Now you deign to answer our prayers? I will suffer this farce no longer!
They eventually accept the aid, though, and Ardbert requests that she take them with her. Their souls must return to the First and do what they can to help Hydaelyn stop the Flood. That's the last we hear of Ardbert and company for a long while. Nearly 3 years passed real-time between patch 3.4 and the launch of Shadowbringers, the expansion which would finally let us see the First ourselves. And while I think the story of the Warriors of Darkness from back in Heavensward is interesting on its own in a vacuum, this is why we're talking about it, because what we see in Shadowbringers is just so striking. Time flows differently in these different worlds, and so, although not much time has passed in the Source, a century has passed in the First. The Flood was stopped successfully through the combined efforts of the Warriors of Darkness and the Oracle of Light, but nothing could bring back what was already lost. By the time the flood was stopped, over 90% of the world had been washed away, leaving nothing but bleached wasteland and the warped former inhabitants, changed into twisted angelic creatures called Sin Eaters. There's some nice symmetry here, as the inhabitants of the 13th, who were consumed by darkness, became demons, and the inhabitants of the 1st, consumed by light, became angels. All that remains of the 1st is the region of Norvrant, and those who managed to escape to it. To stop the flood, Hydaelyn's chosen oracle needed the powers of the Warriors of Darkness, and so they sacrificed what remained of them, their souls, their ether, to empower her. Lamit, Nilebert, Rendere, and Brandon all give themselves up to save their home. Ardbert, though, is stopped. He's told no. His time hasn't come yet. He wants to sacrifice himself to help save his home, but it's not his choice to make. So, he's left behind. When the Oracle and all of his friends are gone, he's dead. Becoming a spirit was required for him to travel to the source, so he is, for all intents and purposes, now a ghost, unseen by living eye, unable to affect the world around him, unable to do anything but watch, and so he walks. He spends 100 years walking and watching the world around him, seeing firsthand what his legacy truly is. The Warriors of Light were hailed as heroes by the world of the First in their day, but now this quite literally decimated world views light and its warriors differently. They're remembered as villains, as monsters who destroyed the world, who killed countless innocents through their actions. Though those living in Norvrant are surviving for now, it's a delicate survival. Losing 9/10 of the world was impossibly disastrous. Nations which were once crucial trade partners, now lost forever. Farmlands gone, entire ecosystems destroyed, with refugees who managed to flood into Norvrant before the flood took them, stretching the region's resources beyond their limits. The flood was stopped, but the excess of light ether is still overwhelming. The Sin Eaters crawl from the wastes into Norvrant and kill or turn those in their path. Worst of all, though, is the night. The lack of a night, rather. The sky is filled with a permanent, burning daylight at all hours, caused by the most powerful of these Sin Eaters, the Light Wardens. These Light Wardens can't be killed, or rather, if they are, all of that excess light has to go somewhere, and so floods into the nearest living being, usually the person who struck the killing blow, transforming them into a Light Warden in turn. The Warriors of Light, as they were known in this world, are blamed for all of this.
This world has had its fill of heroes.
To add insult to injury, the bodies of Ardbert's friends, discarded, left behind when they traveled to the source, have also been claimed by the Sin Eaters, warping them into twisted parodies of who they were in life, now called the Cardinal Virtues, who terrorize the people of Norvrant. Ardbert never asked for any of this. None of them did. They didn't set out to be grand heroes or villains, and I think that's why Ardbert works as a character for me. All they wanted was to make their way in the world. A band of adventurers, of mercenaries really, who just wanted enough to get by. Before they knew it, people were calling them the Warriors of Light, and were hailing them as heroes. And so they stepped into the role and played right into the Ossian's hands. Now, because a plot they didn't know of, perpetrated by true, unseen villains, backfired, they are remembered as villains who destroyed the world. The final salt in the wound is a legend that has begun circling in the 100 years since the world as it was ended. The Warrior of Darkness, the same name they used in the Source while trying to save their world, will come one day to defeat the Light Wardens and bring back the night sky. That's us, of course. We, and quite by accident our allies, the Scions, are summoned to the First by a mysterious figure known as the Crystal Exarch. Again, the Crystal Exarch deserves his own video I'd like to make eventually, so I'm not going to explain too much about him here, other than that he summoned us to be that warrior of darkness, believing our connection to Hydaelyn would allow us to kill the Light Wardens without becoming one ourselves. By the time you arrive in the First, Ardbert is a shadow. He's been walking for a century, forced to watch this hell of his own making. Forced to watch the people he's fought for suffer because of his own misguided actions. Eventually, it wears him away until he's little more than a shade, walking in an endless fugue of contemplation of his own actions.
My hands find no purchase. My gestures catch no eye, and my pleas, be they whispered or screamed, reach not a single ear. I am a shade, cursed to do naught but drift.
Until, that is, we arrive.
I know you. You're the warrior of light from the source. What? Did you just... You can hear me?
We can see him. Only we can see him, for reasons which are not immediately apparent. So we have a new party member, kind of. He can't do anything, he can't interact with the world, but at least now he is seen. At least now he can talk to someone, even if it is his former enemy. He follows us through Shadowbringers as an observer, first lashing out at us because of everything he's lost, but eventually, seeing some of the wrongs he caused, quite by accident, get righted, starts to bring him peace. Ardbert is a very strong part of what makes Shadowbringers special, in my opinion. Part of that is a really strong performance. He's played by Joe Dempsey in the English dub, who is best known for Gendry on Game of Thrones, but also because he slots in perfectly to Shadowbringers as this very tragic figure, without a simple good ending in sight. He is the embodiment of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. In a vacuum, what he and his comrades did in the First was noble, was heroic, but it led to destruction on an unimaginable scale, and now he has to watch the aftermath of that for an eternity. Shadowbringers is obsessed with the idea of legacy, of what we leave behind for those who come after. Ardbert is the dark reality of legacy. We cannot control what we leave behind. We cannot control how we are remembered. You can do everything right and be remembered purely for something beyond your control. Ardbert gave his life for the people of the First, and in return they remember him as their history's greatest monster. Is that bleak? Yeah, maybe. But it's true, and in a way, it's freeing. You cannot know how you'll be remembered. A very lucky few of us will be immortalized in history as heroes. A perhaps unlucky few will be remembered as monsters. Most of us will be neither of these. Unknown by history. Anonymized by time. So what matters is living your life as best you can, and doing what you can to change the world for the better. Legacy is more than how you're remembered. By the end of Ardbert's story, we'll circle back around to it in a bit, he is a hero. He is the reason the day is saved in the end. Norvrant and the Source live on, free of calamity, because he sacrifices himself at the last moment, and he is not remembered for it. The way he ultimately saves the day is unsung, and his name is later used yet again by Elidibus for another scheme entirely. But he is still a hero. Way back in my video about Garlemald, the first video about Final Fantasy I ever made, I said this about Gaius von Baelsar, another villain with a similar arc. He becomes an ally, not a friend. He knows he can never redeem himself for what he's done, but he keeps trying to do the right thing anyway, because it's not about redemption. It's not about his pride or his legacy. It's about helping those he can. There are no scales that weigh the good and bad actions he's done, and even if the people he's hurt will always be greater in number than the people he's helped, that doesn't make the help he does now less real or less true. One more life protected still counts. That's all echoed here. This is an idea which comes up again and again in Final Fantasy XIV. Your legacy isn't just how you're remembered, it's how your actions shape the world. Ardbert, poor, misguided Ardbert, will not be remembered for the great things he did. He will not be remembered for trying to save the world. He'll be remembered for failing it. Yet, every breath drawn by every living soul of the First owes it to Ardbert. Every child born, every first kiss shared, every kind act between two souls, everything that comes to that world is owed to Ardbert, whether they know it or not. What does credit matter compared to that? Ardbert is an example of someone grappling with their own legacy. But now let's shift focus to a story of someone struggling to live up to the legacy of someone else. Minfilia, the younger Minfilia from Shadowbringers, who lives in the shadow of Minfilia, the Oracle of Light. The first Minfilia, who hails from the Source, is one of the main characters of not only Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, but Final Fantasy XIV, the 1.0 version you can't even play anymore. Minfilia Ward is introduced as a young woman with the Echo, one of the relatively few individuals in the world who have received the same blessing of Hydaelyn as the player character. Minfilia is the leader of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, as mentioned earlier, an organization dedicated to protecting the continent of Eorzea from threats in the name of the goddess Hydaelyn. Unlike most of the Scions, she's not really a combatant, and is instead responsible for gathering information and sending you out on missions. Minfilia's story takes a dark turn at the very end of the A Realm Reborn era, during an incident called the Bloody Banquet, or perhaps more commonly referred to by players as Final Fantasy XIV's Red Wedding. Meant to be a celebration with the leaders of all the major power players in Eorzea attending, intending to strengthen their alliance against the Garlean Empire's invasion, things quickly turn sour, as the Scions, and more specifically the player character, are framed for the murder of the Sultana of the city-state of Ul'dah. One by one, you lose Scions, as they stay behind to hold off the city guard that you and Minfilia might escape. There's a lot going on here, with each of the Scions except Alphino being missing in action for a long time after this, presumed dead. Most importantly for this story, Y'shtola and Thancred stay behind in an underground waterway, telling the rest of you to flee. After a moment, though, Minfilia hears a voice calling to her, the voice of Hydaelyn, telling her to return to Y'shtola and Thancred despite what they've said. So she does, and the three are all lost. Much later, we are reunited with Y'shtola and learn what exactly happened in the Royal Waterway. She cast a powerful, dangerous spell in an attempt to teleport her and Thancred to safety at the last moment. While the spell was successful for Thancred, it didn't quite work as well for Y'shtola, dematerializing her, but never rematerializing her, so her physical body and her soul remained scattered in a sort of stasis until being saved by her allies much later on. This had serious repercussions for Y'shtola, permanently blinding her, but even more dire were the effects it had on Minfilia, also caught up in the teleportation spell. While the Bloody Banquet is remembered as FF14's Red Wedding, the only permanent death of an ally here is Minfilia. Even Nanamo, the Sultana whose murder you are framed for, is later discovered to have survived. Minfilia, though, is scattered across the ethereal sea, never to return to her physical form. The reason Hydaelyn told her to return to Y'shtola and Thancred is because she needed her physical form to be scattered this way so that the woman who was once Minfilia could become something else. The voice of the Mother, the Oracle of Light we talked about already, who returned the Warriors of Darkness to the First and stopped the Flood of Light. Hydaelyn knew such an oracle would be needed to save the world of the First. And so she asked Minfilia to make that sacrifice. And she did. Urianger's apparent betrayal was actually a part of this plan. He too knew what Hydaelyn had planned and how she would bring the Warriors of Darkness back into the light. How she would save their world. And so he played the role of the betrayer in order to move the pieces to their rightful place, knowing, though it tore him up inside, that Minfilia's life would be forfeit.
You orchestrated all of this, not to save her, but to send her away!
One life for one world. Such was the bargain, and you the coin, though it were not mine to spend.
Minfilia was a beloved leader to all of the Scions, but none more so than Thancred. Though he was only about 5 years her senior, he's watched over her as her protector since she was a child when her father was killed. Of all of the Scions, Thancred takes her sacrifice the hardest, and refuses to accept what has happened, that she's really gone. Thancred loved Minfilia. It's open to interpretation whether that love was romantic or not. He certainly insists it wasn't. But regardless of whether that was a love of Eros or a love of Philia, it was still love. I've seen people refer to Minfilia's sacrifice as a fridging, a common term for women being killed in fiction purely to give a male character a tragic backstory. And Thancred's angst over her loss is Exhibit A for that. I don't personally agree with that, though. This is just my 2 cents, take it as you will. I'm not trying to rob you of your interpretation. But I think the important difference here is that this is Minfilia's choice to make. She is not robbed of her agency. Hydaelyn is not forcing her to become an avatar of her will. And she doesn't just die to give Thancred something to brood about. She chooses to sacrifice herself for her cause, even though one of the most important people in her life, Thancred, would have her do differently.
Have we not walked together in the light of the crystal, and at her bidding borne witness to the joys and sorrows of this land? Each and every one of you knows my heart. If this be the price I must pay, I pay it gladly.
She sacrifices herself to save an entire world, the same way the Warriors of Darkness do. I really like this plot beat. Minfilia falls a bit flat for me before this, to be honest, but this shows her dedication to her cause, her conviction. Every single character we meet in the first owes Minfilia their life. One life for one world. That is Minfilia's legacy. That is the legacy which her namesake, the Minfilia of the First, finds herself forced to live up to. When you reach Shadowbringers, you start to hear people talking about the Minfilias, plural, a rather bizarre name to be dropped as a local legend to a completely different world. It turns out, when Minfilia sacrificed herself, her soul wasn't fully gone. Her power as the Oracle of Light finds itself reincarnated over and over and over again over the 100-year history of Norvrant post-Flood. The Oracle of Light is reborn, not her personality, but her power, each time as a new golden-haired girl with powers of light. These girls always become powerful warriors in the fight against the Sin Eaters, and over they find themselves eventually killed in the fight against them, only to be reborn again. Each of these girls is named Minfilia, after the legendary Oracle of Light who stopped the flood. The current Minfilia, though, has been forced to live a different kind of life. One of the factions in Shadowbringers, which we're not going to go too deep into in this video, is called Yulmore. Rich and powerful, Yulmore's leader, Vothri, has an inexplicable sway with the Sin Eaters, which makes them passive before him. A Caligula figure, he leads the nation of Yulmore, the city of final pleasures, to be a hedonistic paradise of sorts, where the residents accept the Sin Eaters and idle the dying days of the world away, filling their lives with lust and gluttony. When the current reincarnation of Minfilia was discovered at a young age, Vothri ordered her to be taken away from her family, and raised by the Yulmoran general Ranjit as a pawn for Yulmore to control. Ranjit had taught and raised many other Minfilias before this one. Once, they fought the Sin Eaters together, before Yulmore stood alongside the Sin Eaters. Ranjit sent many Minfilias to their deaths before this one, only to seek out the next to replace them. We don't know all that much about the specifics of Minfilia's life in Yulmore, but we definitely know it wasn't a pleasant one. This Minfilia wasn't allowed to use her powers to fight the Sin Eaters as she was destined to, instead being forced to use them on Yulmore's enemies, as Yulmore now stands at peace with the Sin Eaters, hoping to usher in the end of Norvrant. Because time is convoluted in Norvrant, Thancred ends up being pulled to the first years before the Warrior of Light is, by mistake. When he learns of Minfilia's namesake being kept as a pet of Vothri in a gilded cage, he goes to Yulmore and single-handedly rescues her. He watches over her, as he did the Minfilia of the Source, and together they spend years on the run from Yulmore. While Thancred was a better father figure than Ranjit, he was haunted by his love for his own Minfilia, and his desire to see her brought back. Thancred cared for the younger Minfilia, but his own pain kept him emotionally distant from her, in a way that was very hurtful. This led her to believe he hated her. One of my favorite encounters in the Eden raid of Shadowbringers is a great representation of Minfilia's complicated history with Thancred. The villain of the raid conjures a powerful foe from Minfilia's memories, made from her greatest hopes and fears, and it takes the form of a combination of Thancred and Ranjit, the two father figures she has had in her life. Thancred is Minfilia's great hope, but for years his emotional distance intimidated her every bit as much as Ranjit did. When we're introduced to Minfilia, she has been recaptured by Ranjit, because she ran from Thancred, sensing her destiny was to come find the Warrior of Light, but fearing that Thancred wouldn't allow her to. The way we see Thancred talk to her, at least at first, is heartbreaking. Every time she tries to assert herself, Thancred scolds her. He treats her as a child, even though she's 17, notably the same age he was when he first became the original Minfilia's protector.
You, the hero from another world. I was asleep when I felt it. A presence. Someone I was meant to meet. They were close and I knew I had to go to them. But with all the commotion in Lakeland, I was afraid that Thancred wouldn't let me.
And would I have been wrong? Had I arrived a moment later, you would be back in your cell in Yulmore. And now we have Ranjit snapping at our heels. You really have outdone yourself this time.
As a result of this, Minfilia spends much of the story of Shadowbringers acting timid and meek, and Thancred treats her as a fragile flower to be watched over, despite her powers, and her training. Worst of all, Thancred kept a secret from Minfilia, a secret which was hers to know. Sometime before we arrive in the first, he takes her to the region of Amarang, to the very place where the original Minfilia stopped the flood. When there, the voice of Hydaelyn, the Minfilia Thancred knew, speaks through the girl's mouth. He begs for some way to bring her back, but her body is long gone. There is a way for her to return to life, though. One day, should the young Minfilia find the fight too exhausting, find the struggle of living up to her title as the Oracle of Light too difficult, then the original Minfilia can take up the mantle, fully reincarnating into her body and overwriting the girl who was once there. On the other hand, if she should wish to fully inherit her powers, then Minfilia can fully pass her strength on to the young girl, giving her the full powers she was born into, but destroying what remains of the original Minfilia's spirit in the process, and stopping the cycle of reincarnation that she has been a part of for the past 100 years. There's a difficult choice coming. A choice that will kill one of the two Minfilias. It's not Thancred's choice to make. It's not his legacy to accept or deny. He doesn't have the words to tell the young Minfilia of the choice she needs to face.
I know why you never said anything. Because you thought you could keep me safe by keeping me in the dark. And maybe I thought so too. But I knew, Thancred. I always knew.
Oh, I see. I thought you were a rather underwhelming reincarnation. But it all makes sense now. The Oracle lies dormant within you, doesn't she? But to draw on her true power, you must become one, both body and soul. To wit, one being must consume the other. Who shall be the lucky winner?
If you're familiar with the Final Fantasy franchise overall, there are shades of Yuna's story from FF10 here. Both are 17-year-old girls with great powers and a sort of religious destiny that costs them great personal sacrifice. The difference here is that Minfilia has an out. She can take up the mantle from the original Minfilia, or she can sacrifice her own life to bring back the greatest hero of her world. That's a terrible burden. Can she live up to the original Minfilia's legacy, or would the world be better off with that Minfilia than they are with this one? The young Minfilia suffers from a sort of survivor's guilt. Though she isn't blood related to either her namesake or Thancred, the parallels to a more grounded situation aren't hard to see. Her mother died before she was old enough to know her, and now her father is emotionally distant and, she believes, resents her for it. Minfilia says at times that it would be better if she were gone, if the original Minfilia were there instead. She even begins to believe that Thancred blames her for Minfilia being gone. The weight of her legacy, the weight of the expectations she believes she is expected to live up to, weighs heavily on Minfilia. She's just a 17-year-old girl who never asked for any of this, never asked to have some great legacy to live up to, and you can tell the expectations placed on her are suffocating. This comes to a head when the group returns to Amarang, at Minfilia's behest. She wants to return to the place where the flood was stopped. She wants to speak to the original Minfilia and ask for help to seek the remaining Light Wardens. She wants to inherit the full power of the Oracle of Light, and ask the original Minfilia to sacrifice what remains of herself to do so. On the journey, she has something of a breakdown, and Orianger comes to comfort her.
What troubleth thee, child?
I shouldn't be here. I don't deserve to be. I don't deserve any of the things you've done for me. I'm just a burden, helpless and hopeless. If tomorrow came and I was gone, it would be better for everyone. Thancred most of all. He'll never admit it, but I can see it in his eyes. I wish he'd just say it. Just say that he hates me that he wishes I was dead so that she could return.
None of this is thy doing, child. 'Twas I who set the oracle on her path unto the first. I who condemned you all to suffer these torments. 'Tis my sin alone, and one that will haunt me unto my dying day. Yet I dare not dwell overlong on my many regrets, for the world is a tapestry of fates, interwoven and inseparable. And we who strive to better it cannot choose but make difficult decisions. For naught of worth was ever achieved without sacrifice. And thus must man ever struggle to weigh life against loss. The one for whom thou mournest beareth no grudge. Were she here, she would not suffer thee to languish in sorrow. She would tell thee to seek thine own path, thine own purpose.
And that is what Minfilia's story is about. Minfilia spends the bulk of Shadowbringers grappling with someone else's legacy, but it's only when she makes her fate her own, makes her life her own, that she is able to fully come into her own power. In truth, it was never Minfilia failing Thancred. It was Thancred failing Minfilia. Thancred hears this conversation between Minfilia and Urianger, but it's still not enough to push him to open up to her. The last obstacle on Minfilia's road to return to speak with her namesake is Ranjit. The three of you, the player character, Thancred, and Minfilia, are ambushed by Ranjit, seeking to take control of Minfilia once again. When Ranjit talks about her, he isn't talking about this Minfilia. He's talking about all of them. All the girls he has controlled, raised, trained, and then sent to their deaths.
You forget to whom you speak. Who armed you, trained you, fought and killed 1,000 sin-eaters with you. And when you were inevitably cut down and lay lifeless in my arms, who sought out your successor to carry on the futile struggle again and again?
For the first time, Minfilia stands up to him. Minfilia rejects what he's saying here, rejects being equated to all the other Minfilias before her. For the first time, she asserts herself as her own person, not someone else's legacy.
I don't know about the world, but I never asked to be saved. However much it hurts, and however hard it gets, it's my life, and I want to live it on my own terms! And those mad fools you want me to abandon, the ones I've traveled with, fought with, and may one day die with, they feel the same. So no, I will not be deceived, no matter what you say. I refuse to believe it's all for nothing. They're everything to me. All I have, and all I need. And I would gladly do anything for them. Let us pass, or kill me. I'm not leaving here without them.
It is here, after she says this, that Thancred finally realizes the error of his ways, the way he has mistreated Minfilia, and all the things he's left unspoken between them. Stepping between her and Ranjit, he says this.
I heard what you said, and I'm sorry for all the things I've left unspoken.
You have to go, now!
This leads to the two Minfilias finally meeting each other, and to our young heroine making a difficult choice. One for the world, but also one for herself.
Ours is a meeting long overdue. Full glad am I that we may finally speak. My dear, sweet child. Yours is a burden none should ever be forced to bear. Such pain and suffering you have endured. Yet still you came. For this and more, I thank you.
I've lost count of the times I've almost given up. If people hadn't helped me every step of the way, I never would have made it.
Yet here you stand, resolved. Now, tell me your heart's desire.
To defeat the Sin Eaters, and bring this world back from the brink. The flood has washed away so much of this world. So many people and places and possibilities, and all the heroes who fought to protect them. Yet here the Scions are, trying so hard to help those few of us who remain, and seeing how tirelessly they work, how completely committed they are to the cause. I can't help but believe. But I want to do more than just watch and cheer. I want to make a difference. I want to help them, like they helped me, and maybe even inspire others to do the same. Coming together, providing for one another. That's the only way forward I can see. Since all of our heroes are gone, we'll just have to make heroes of ourselves.
That is her ultimate decision. Since all of our heroes are gone, we'll just have to make heroes of ourselves. When the two of you return from this vision of the Oracle of Light, the young Minfilia's appearance has changed. She's no longer blonde with glowing blue eyes. She has red hair and her eyes appear normal. She's no longer Minfilia, no longer an extension of someone else's legacy. She has asserted her own identity and become her own person. From here on out, she no longer goes by the name Minfilia. Her name is now Reen, as suggested by Thancred, a word which he says means blessing, for that is what she is, not only to him, but to the world. Thancred's sudden change of heart, sudden correction of the way he treats Reen, wouldn't work for me if we didn't have a good chunk of Shadowbringers left at this point. Yet, from here on out, things do change between them. Thancred is no longer overbearing and overprotective. He's no longer treating her like a little girl, but with respect, as the young woman she now is. What's more, Reen becomes a party member in the remaining dungeons of Shadowbringers, should you choose to use the trust system instead of venturing into them with other players. She is trained and powerful, and though young, that doesn't mean she's not competent. Reen's story is a story of how we navigate the legacy of those who came before us. But what it ultimately says is that no one's legacy is our burden to shoulder but our own. It is a really wonderful coming-of-age story of a young woman who has been told someone else's legacy is hers to bear, who has been told she is nothing but an extension of those who came before her, rejecting that idea, asserting herself as her own person. I've been very harsh towards Thancred in this section, and to be clear, I don't hate Thancred. I don't think he's a terrible character or a terrible person. I actually think the way he acts here is quite well written and feels authentic. This is actually the storyline where I started to like Thancred, or at least like the writing for him. He's processing the loss of a loved one and trying to protect someone she left behind. He fails at first, but I don't think it's bad writing for a character to fail, and the growth he shows by the end of the expansion works for me. He is proud of Reen. He loves her. He just doesn't have the emotional maturity to be able to express that, at least at first. After she takes the name Reen, after Thancred tells her he's sorry for all the things he's left unsaid, and makes an attempt to say them, I really like their relationship as an adoptive father and daughter. In the end of Shadowbringers and beyond into the patch content, they eventually have a very sweet and loving relationship. That said, I think it cheapens both Minfilia's stories to reduce them to how Thancred feels about them, and how Thancred treats them. I talk about Thancred here because he is an important supporting character in the stories of both Minfilias, but I tried very hard to make this section about Minfilia and Reen, and not just Thancred's brooding over them. The reality is that it's hard to talk about Reen without talking about Thancred, because she is viewing herself, her own actions, through how she thinks they are being perceived by others, specifically by Thancred. There's an argument that that's a failing of Shadowbringers, that it defines Reen by her relationship to other characters, and it's one I'm sympathetic to. However, her story is ultimately about learning that she deserves to live on her own terms, and to be her own person, not the person anyone else wants her to be. That's why this story works for me. We see her go from so overwhelmingly self-conscious of what others think of her, to asserting her own right to live, her own individuality. Later on, in the raid for Shadowbringers, which we're not going to be talking about in detail today, we see her becoming a more self-reliant person, and see her world expand beyond Thancred. That begins here. This is Reen's story. I love Reen as a character. I love how she reflects a lot of real emotions teenagers about to take their first steps into adulthood face. Trying to figure out your own place in the world, trying to feel comfortable asserting yourself as your own person and not just an extension of your parents, doing what they want, what they plan for you. Even that feeling that everyone hates you, that you're doing everything wrong and letting everyone down, is a very recognizable feeling a lot of teenagers and young adults go through. It also talks about a very real emotion, a more relatable one than what we see someone like Ardbert go through. A guilty feeling that you don't deserve to be alive, to continue on, when others didn't have that chance. It rejects this guilt, though. Reen is innocent, and her right to live has nothing to do with anyone else. Reen's story is about navigating legacy. The answer it gives for how we live up to others' legacy isn't as simple as just pretending we have nothing to live up to at all. Reen still inherits her legacy as the Oracle of Light, but she makes it her own. You are not just your parents' legacy. It is not your responsibility to live up to the expectations placed on you. But it is up to you to find your own place in the world. Assert yourself as your own person, and not live up, but live on in the memory of loved ones you've lost. That's a powerful message, I think. And so that brings us to the third tale from Shadowbringers we'll be talking about today. Ardbert's story is about how we cannot control our own legacy. Reen's story is about how we navigate the legacy of others. Emet-Selch's story, though, is about a man who refused to acknowledge his legacy at all. Refused to acknowledge that his time had come and gone, and refused to pass the torch to another generation. A man who went mad with grief and loneliness, trying to bring back the world he once knew. There's an adage about writing that every great villain is the hero of their own story. I don't actually think that's a universal truth, but it is a great description of Emet-Selch. What Emet-Selch does is monstrous. He kills countless people, yet from his perspective, it is the only path forward. It is his responsibility to bring back the loved ones he once lost. The problem with Emet-Selch is that he's stuck between two true statements. He has a responsibility to bring back the world he once knew, but he doesn't have the right to do so. We are first introduced to Emet-Selch under a different name, Solus Zoscalvus, founding father and original emperor of Garlemald. In truth, though, Emet-Selch is an immortal Ascian, one of only 3 unsundered beings who survived the ancient calamity intact. The 3 Ascian leaders, Lahabrea, Elidibus, and Emet-Selch himself. Where Lahabrea and Elidibus like to work from the shadows, unseen puppet masters behind the scenes, Emet-Selch has taken a different approach throughout the ages. His tool of choice in sowing the seeds of discontent is imperialism. Until some 60 years before the events of the game, Garlemald was an unremarkable region, the people of its frozen wastes lucky to survive, especially since all Garleans are cursed with a genetic inability to use magic. Emet-Selch, under the assumed identity of Solus Zoscalvus, brought about a technological revolution with the invention of Magitech, the advanced technology that propelled the region to a vast military superiority, and which let them spread out from the frozen north of the continent of Ilsabard to conquer not only their rivals on that continent, but then other nations like Doma to the east and Garabania to the west, all at the behest of the man now named their emperor.
No lands must remain beyond our grasp. Go forth, conquer, rule! Forgive me. A sudden pang of nostalgia for those halcyon days. Exploring virgin territories, subjugating primitive peoples, all for the glory of Garlemald.
If you've brought your ivory standard, I'll be happy to tell you where to stick it.
Behind the propaganda of reclaiming lands which were once their own, beyond the lies he fed his people of securing better lives for them, Garlemald secretly only ever had one purpose: to cause a calamity. Indeed, that is precisely what they did with Project Meteor, which brought down the Lesser Moon of Dalamud on Eorzea and released Bahamut from it, causing the 7th Umbral Calamity, and ending the original release of the game. This is not the only reveal Shadowbringers, and the patch content serving as prelude to it, brings about Emet-Selch's machinations, though. It turns out it's not just Garlemald which Emet-Selch founded. He also reveals himself to have been the shaping force behind Alleg, an ancient nation whose technology vastly surpassed even that of Garlemald, skewing all the way into science fiction with technology like computers, robots, human cloning, even space travel. Dalamud, the lesser moon which served as Bahamut's prison, was itself a creation of Alleg, an entire artificial moon. Much like Garlemald, Alleg was a powerful imperialist nation, conquering and subjugating seemingly the entire planet in the distant past, before, much like Garlemald, causing a calamity. In this case, the 4th Umbral Calamity, when Alleg attempted to use all the power of the imprisoned Bahamut within the moon to create a portal to another world. The world we know as the 13th, or the Void, and the surge of energy caused such incomprehensibly powerful earthquakes that entire mountain ranges are said to have fallen, and the entire empire was swallowed up into the earth. Indeed, Emet-Selch introduces himself not only as Solus Zoscalvus, but as the founding father of myriad other imperially inclined nations. Another one which we learn he directly had a hand in shaping was the aforementioned Yulmor in the first. He created Vothri, made him the monster that he is. We know for a fact that he was personally responsible for 2 empires that led directly to calamity. It's not hard to imagine he was responsible for some of these other nations involved in calamity too. Perhaps, and to be clear this is speculation, he could have had a hand in Nim, Omdapor, or Vak, 3 nations of mages whose violent war caused the 6th Umbral Calamity. Perhaps some of the other calamities, which we know very little about, were achieved in a similar manner. In any case, the reason why Emet-Selch isn't around for A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, and much of Stormblood, while Lahabrea, Elidibus, and their various underlings are running around trying to cause chaos, is because he's been so effective that his part of the work in reuniting the shards is done. His plans have fruited. He's brought about his fair share of calamities, and is now meant to rest. He let his physical body as Solus Zosgalvis die around the time A Realm Reborn started, so that he might lie dormant, sleeping until Lahabrea and Elidibus hold up their end of the deal, and are able to reunite the shards and awaken their god, Zodiark. The problem is, for all they make themselves out to be superior to the lesser mortal races of the Source, Lahabrea and Elidibus are not as competent as Emet-Selch has proven himself to be. Their plans have been foiled time and time again by you, the Warrior of Light. Lahabrea is actually killed, his soul, not just his physical form, at the end of Heavensward, when he gets eaten by King Thordan's magic sword. Heavensward is not the topic of today's video, so I'm just going to leave that sentence where it lies. With his allies running low and his frustrations running high, Elidibus calls Emet-Selch back from his rest prematurely, so that he could help reunite the remaining shards, and stop the Warrior of Light's interference. What's really and truly fascinating about Emet-Selch, though, and what makes him a far more compelling character than Lahabrea or Elidibus are as villains, is that he does not come at you with the sword when he is brought back. Rather, he comes at you with the olive branch. Emet-Selch exists as a silent watcher in the background for roughly the first half of Shadowbringers, showing up in a few cutscenes, letting the player know that he's a piece on the board. When you slay your second Light Warden, though, the Fairy King Titania, he reveals himself to you of his own volition, and extends an offer. Peace between you and the Ossians. You have been a most powerful thorn in their side, but what if he could get you to help with the rejoining instead?
And so, while it is liable to be troublesome, I have settled upon a different approach. Cooperation.
It's an insane offer with what you know of the Ossians. The thing is, up to this point, you don't know much of anything about the Ossians except what you've been able to observe. They are, in your eyes, an immortal death cult trying to cause chaos on an unbelievable scale for thousands upon thousands of years. As Emet-Selch says, though, you know their mission, but not their motives. As hard as it is to believe, the Ossians' motives are not unsympathetic. Part of what makes Emet-Selch so memorable as a villain is, for much of Shadowbringers, he sort of works like a non-combat party member. He, similarly to Ardbert, is following your group and observing, even helping at times, in the fight against the Light Wardens. Ominously, and to the confusion of the group, he is upfront with you about one thing. His goals remain the same as ever. Rejoin the First. Defeating the Light Wardens and saving the world are not one and the same. Let's talk about this performance for a minute. The Ossians we've seen up to this point, most notably Lahabrea and Elidibus, are presented as pretty generic, very dour supervillains. Emet-Selch, on the other hand, is jovial, friendly. He's got this very dry sense of humor that makes him a real joy to watch.
If you really want to stay, then help us fight.
No, I think not. I am an observer, nothing more.
I can only speak to the English language performance, but actor Renee Zellweger absolutely knocks it out of the park here. Villains should be a lot of fun for the audience to watch, and Emet-Selch is exactly the type of villain I like the most. And the type of villain which is just very appealing to watch. He gets so many great lines, both funny and, later, when they need to be, heart-wrenching. He's the only villain in Final Fantasy XIV who's fun. I like a lot of the other villains in Final Fantasy XIV, but Gaius is not fun. Xenos is not fun. Emet-Selch is just a blast to watch on screen.
But yes, moral relativism and all that. Case in point, I do not consider you to be truly alive, ergo I will not be guilty of murder if I kill you.
Whenever Emet-Selch isn't on screen, I'm asking, where's Emet-Selch? Put a pin in that line about moral relativism, by the way. We're going to be circling back to it in a bit. What I'm getting at here is that having Emet-Selch follow you around like this, having him serve as a party member, was a really clever decision, because by the time he becomes the main antagonist in the final act of Shadowbringers, a lot of the room for him to be fun has come and gone. Once we get to his big villain monologue at Mount Gog and then Amarat, we are deep enough into the story that the time for quips has come and passed. By having him following us around and often openly mocking us, it lets the player form a connection to him you never get with any other villain. Plus, Ossians are really hard to kill unless you have a magic sword sitting around to eat them. I think it's really clever to have our immortal adversary following our heroes around the whole time, because what's to stop him? What are we gonna do, kill him? We've seen how that goes. He'll just respawn. Most importantly, it works. Emet-Selch's plan here, the reason he's sticking around, is not only to evaluate us, more on that later, it's to let us get to know the Ossians better, both in-universe and out-of-universe. The player gets to know Emet-Selch, gets to grow very attached to him, and the story is so much better for it. Part of that is because Emet-Selch's goodwill towards you is not just lip service. At one point during the Raktika Greatwood chapter, Y'shtola sacrifices herself to save a village that has been poisoned, grabbing the antidote out of the air before plummeting into a chasm. Thinking fast, she actually casts the same spell she used to save Thancred and herself after the Bloody Banquet once again. Unfortunately this time, there is no clear way to bring her back once she's dematerialized. Until, that is, Emet-Selch volunteers.
Ah, very well. I'll go and fetch her. Perhaps a clear and unambiguous act of kindness will serve to win the trust you seem so determined to deny me.
Emet-Selch didn't have to do this. It would have been in his and the Ossians' best interests if one of the Scions were forever lost. But, as a token of his goodwill, and to prove his offer of being allies is legitimate, he does save her.
Is there aught you wish to say to me? A word of thanks, perhaps?
He is trying to make peace here, and trying to get you to see things from the Ossian perspective. Convinced you will agree that what they seek is what's best for the world, if you can only get a clearer picture with an open mind. The Ossians, pre-Shadowbringers, were not compelling villains, because we had no understanding of why they did the things that they did. They were always there behind the scenes of virtually every plan we ever had to thwart, but as Emmet says, though we knew their goals, we had no idea what their motives were. That made them very hard to care about as anything more than comic supervillains, seeking to sow chaos and discord in the service of a dark and vengeful god. Emet-Selch, though, getting to know him firsthand, is sympathetic. He's emotional. Everything he says and does has an almost wistful quality to it. He uses sass and quips to hide his true emotions. There's a real sadness behind his words. There's a tiredness behind his eyes.
What? You thought ancient beings like us incapable of crying? Well, rest assured that if your heart could be broken, then so can mine. Back when the world was whole, we had family, friends, loves.
And that sadness, that exhaustion from thousands upon thousands of years of loneliness and longing wearing down on him, is what motivates Emet-Selch. and what I think makes him work so well as a villain. There are a lot of motivations for villains. Gaius was motivated by zealous nationalism. Vandaniel was motivated by nihilism, a yearning for oblivion. Xenos is motivated by the desire to feel anything, a thirst that can only be slaked by mortal combat. Emet-Selch, though, is motivated by nostalgia. He is motivated by an endless yearning for the halcyon days he remembers, when he was surrounded by friends and family. He remembers things being better than they are now, and he wants them to be like that once again, for the good of all. When we finish the Raktika Greatwood chapter of Shadowbringers, our group stumbles across a series of ancient murals which predate even the earliest known societies of the First. The party isn't initially quite sure what they depict until Emet-Selch recognizes them. They are the history of the ancient Ossians. This is easily the most important lore dump since learning of the nature of the Source and the Reflections back in Heavensward patch content, because it tells of the nature of that original calamity which caused the world to fracture in the first place. In a nutshell, in ancient times, the Ossians people were all immortal and incredibly powerful. Then there came a great disaster where their creation magics began to run out of control, which threatened to destroy everything. To stop this, half of the population chose to willingly sacrifice themselves to usher the very first primal into existence, Zodiark, the dark god which the Ossians still worship and seek to free. Zodiark was able to stop these final days, but the world had already been ravaged too far beyond recovery. The people would never be able to sustain themselves, and so half of the remaining population sacrificed themselves to restore the natural world to what it once was, and bring the planet back to habitability. That quarter of the people who remained, like Emet-Selch, Elidibus, and La Habrea, became obsessed with bringing their loved ones back. Obsessed with bringing the world back to what it once was. They planned on fostering new growth on the planet, new life, perhaps even new civilizations. Once these new creatures had grown in number, they would be offered up to Zodiark as sacrifice, to bring back everyone who was now lost. Another faction, though, was horrified by this idea of raising entire species with the sole purpose of being cattle to be sacrificed. They argued instead that as their society had failed, it was time to pass the world on to those who came after. The new life that would grow and thrive on the planet of Aetheris should not be sacrificed. It should be allowed to inherit the world. Led by a woman named Venat, this second faction sacrificed themselves to empower her and transform her into the second primal, Hydaelyn. In order to stop Zodiark and to stop those who were planning to empower him, Hydaelyn shattered the world, scattering it and its people across 13 reflections. The only 3 survivors of this calamity who somehow remained intact were Elidibus, La Habrea, and of course, Emet-Selch. These last 3 unsundered beings were horrified by what became of the world. The very souls of their friends were split into 14 parts, each part lesser than what they had once been. These beings were so much weaker than what they had once been. They no longer lived forever, growing old and dying. They could no longer use creation magics to breathe new life into existence with a thought. They were no longer uniform, instead split into the myriad races we see today, like Hyur, Elizin, Aura, and so on. That is the motivation of the Ossians. Bring back the ones they once loved. The thing I love about this motivation is that it actually manages to make Emet-Selch's line about moral relativism work. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, moral relativism is the philosophical idea that there is not a universal morality, that what is right for one person is wrong for another, and that it all comes down to perspective. That's a really, really simplified version of an incredibly complicated subject, but in a nutshell, that is what Emet-Selch is saying here. Legitimately, from his perspective, he is not a murderer, even though he's directly killed hundreds of millions of people by causing calamities. To Emet-Selch's eyes, the people of the modern world are lesser. If we buy into the core conceit of the game's world building, then he's factually right. The feeling I get from how he talks about the Sundering is that the people we see walking around in the game's present day are less vibrant than those in the ancient world, in a way we can't fully understand. I get the feeling that Emet-Selch's ancient people were not only stronger than the current incarnation of man, but felt entire emotions we can't even comprehend. From Emmet's perspective, the people walking around are little more than how we would view NPCs in a game. A compelling simulacrum of living people, but not truly alive. Just as we wouldn't pause to take an evil option in a game that kills NPCs, killing the inhabitants of the first is not immoral. Again, from Emmet's perspective. In other words, the same way I do not consider myself a murderer if I drop a sim in a pool and remove the ladder just to watch him drown, Emet-Selch does not consider himself a murderer for killing hundreds of millions of walking dead half-souls.
You are a mistake. For we who have known perfection, the shattered source and these shards are ghastly mockeries of the true world. The ephemeral lives you exalt are pale imitations, utterly devoid of meaning.
Not only does this revelation completely color everything that is still to come in the game, it changes everything we thought we knew. All along, we've been fighting primals, summoned by the various races. False gods, tulpas, created from belief in them and fueled by magical power. All of this we've been doing in the name of our own goddess, Hydaelyn. All along, we've been no different from the kobolds, Sahagin, and other so-called beast tribes summoning their gods. We've been working for a primal, too.
I'm sorry, I can only assume I misheard. But it sounded an awful lot like you were implying both Zodiac and Hydaelyn are not gods. Well...
What? Not gods of the first? Is that what you thought these paintings depicted? Or... Oh. They are gods after a fashion, yes. But no different from the kind with which you are so intimately acquainted. Formed of faith and prayer, of conviction and devotion. The eldest and most powerful of primals.
It's worth noting that none of this is a lie. At no point in this story does Emet-Selch lie to you. He is genuinely trying to explain what the Ossians seek to do, and genuinely trying to evaluate whether those of you from the source are worth having as allies.
What was your true purpose in approaching us?
By your 12, boy, have I not told you before that everything I said was the truth? You were specimens by which I might gauge man's potential as it stands. I genuinely had an interest in you, genuinely considered taking you on as allies.
Keep in mind, you are from the source, and every time a rejoining has occurred, the people of the source have regained part of their original souls. In other words, you are not 1/14th of a person in Emet-Selch's eyes, but 8/14ths, or 4/7ths if you'd prefer to use metric units. He's trying to gauge the Ossians' progress. His bit about moral relativism, about not considering you a person, That's actually what he's trying to decide. Are you a person now, in his eyes, having regained over half your soul? Kind of. There's one more wrinkle in his plan we'll get to in a bit. When we hear Emet-Selch talking about Amarot, the capital city of his ancient society, there is such longing in his voice. Longing for a time that was, on the face of it, just better than the current world is. Once again, the performance really sells it.
A vision shared of a paradise lost, preserved only in song and scripture and paint. Once upon a time. Yet here we find ourselves again, to look, learn, and remember. Men knew peace and contentment, and with our adamant souls we could live for an age. There was no conflict born of want or disparity. Our differences paled into insignificance next to all we had in common. And then there was Amarot. Never was a city more magnificent. From the humblest streets to the highest spires, she fairly gleamed.
From his perspective, what he seeks to do is logical. Moreover, it's ethical. The only ethical action he can take. If he can sacrifice these lesser creatures of the reflections, beings who, from his experience, are just factually less vibrant, feeling less emotion, living less meaningful lives, he can restore the people of the Source to their former greatness. Eternal, peaceful, content. What Hydaelyn did in sundering people was a cruelty, again from the Ossian perspective. She preserved the lives that would have been sacrificed to Zodiark, but reduced them. By rejoining the worlds, from his perspective, Emet-Selch is righting Hydaelyn's wrong. He is saving the people of the Source. That said, this is not a lie, but it is a half-truth. Emet-Selch's motivations are not as benevolent to the people of the Source as he wants to make them seem. The rub here is that the Ossians' plans do not end with simply rejoining all the worlds. Their plans have not changed from what Hydaelyn initially sought to stop. The real reason Emet-Selch is trying to gauge the potential of mankind is to determine whether they are whole enough to make suitable sacrifices to Zodiark. This puts the lie to Emet-Selch's line about moral relativism from earlier. He may not consider himself a murderer for killing half-formed souls in calamities, but if he were to fully restore these souls back to what they once were, and then sacrifice them to Zodiark, he absolutely would be guilty of murder by his own logic. The reason this isn't a lie is because those currently living in the Source are those same friends and family he once lost, or the reincarnations of them, so he's still saving them, but not the versions of them who are currently alive. What Emet-Selch himself lost sight of is that he is wrong not only from the perspective of those he would murder, but from the perspective of those he wants to bring back. Those very people he remembers, those very people he loves so much, would be disgusted by his actions to bring them back. The people of Amarot who chose to sacrifice themselves did so willingly. That's beautiful, and it's something which Emet-Selch directly holds over the player's head. Would half the population of this world selflessly sacrifice themselves to save those who remain? Probably not. He uses that as justification for his actions, as justification for bringing back those he once knew and loved. The thing he can't seem to see is that, in trying to bring them back, trying to grasp on to the world he once knew that's slipping through his fingers, he isn't respecting their sacrifice. The past version of Emet-Selch himself would be horrified to see what he's become through millennia of loneliness. That sort of thing changes a person, and not for the better. Would you want to spend thousands of years with only La Habrea and Elidibus as company? Have you met these guys? The game also draws parallels between Emet-Selch's eternal loneliness and Ardbert's wandering through Norvrant as a ghost for 100 years.
The guilt of causing the flood, knowing everyone hated me. But the worst thing was the solitude. Time wears you down, aye. But solitude eats away at you. It was this close to finishing me off. But as bad as it got, and as empty as I felt, I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like for Emet-Selch.
And, most importantly of all, Emet-Selch's memory of Amarat and of the ancient Ossians is beautiful, but it's also not real. This echoes the way in real life we, all too often, pine for the good old days which never existed. We tend to remember the good, but not all of the bad that came with it. We get a much clearer and more detailed picture of what the ancient Ossian society was really like in Endwalker. It was a paradise, yes, but every paradise has its shadows. The ancients were eternal, peaceful, and powerful. Their culture was also stifling. It valued uniformity so highly that to express individuality was seen as a taboo. Everyone wore the same thing, everyone held the same beliefs, everyone felt the same feelings. The ancients believed themselves to be so perfect that to express discontent in paradise was a foreign idea. The very idea of feeling bad for any reason was seen as a character flaw. Those who didn't fit comfortably into this world, while not exactly oppressed, were viewed as strange, as problems to be fixed. That world was never going to make it, and, well, I have an entire other video about that story, so I don't want to get too into it here, but that society's flaws are what led to the final days, and to its downfall. Amarat was its own undoing. Its time came and went naturally, and Emet-Selch and his compatriots refused to acknowledge that. Emet-Selch refuses to pass the torch on to those who come after, the next generation, if you will, and instead chooses to burn the world down to try to hold on to the past. He is refusing to accept the legacy his people have left behind, refusing to acknowledge the legitimacy of those who come after. Instead, he trivializes them, treats them all as children or as animals incapable of making their own choices, incapable of holding the world in their own hands. It's not that Emet-Selch's motives are unsympathetic. Emet-Selch is an extremely sympathetic character. But it's still an evil act. This story comes to a head, and the story of Shadowbringers enters its final act as you slay the final Light Warden atop Mount Gulg. With each Light Warden you've killed, you've absorbed a tremendous amount of light, enough to turn most into a Light Warden themselves. Because of your blessing from Hydaelyn, and because your soul and strength are greater than those of the first, you've been able to contain the light from the first 4 Light Wardens successfully. Although, it's begun to strain you. The light from the 5th and final Warden ends up being too much, however, and you begin to break, shining as the light begins to tear you apart. The Crystal Exarch had been planning for this all along. He knew not even you could contain that much ether, and so was secretly planning to take this burden from you at the last moment, and then teleport himself into the rift between worlds, sacrificing himself, but safely containing all of the light that's been plaguing the first, in a lifeless void where it can't hurt anyone. Emet-Selch has other plans, however. Your inability to contain the ether has proven to Emet-Selch that you are not yet worthy enough sacrifices to bring back his world. You have failed his test. You have failed evaluation as a person. You are now, once again, only a means to an end. By preventing the Crystal Exarch from absorbing the ether, he is cursing you to become a Light Warden yourself. A single Light Warden as powerful as the 5 you killed combined. The world of the First won't stand a chance against such a powerful Sin Eater.
You still retain your form and your senses. But you have all but become a Sin Eater. Whether you will it or no, your mere existence will serve to engulf the world in light. Those in your company will likewise turn into Sin Eaters, and in time you will succumb to your base instincts and hunt innocents to feast on their sweet, sweet ether. Those few with the will left to fight may rise up against you, but before your absolute might, they will quickly know despair. There is no hope. We are finished. Mankind is finished. Ah, the irony. What Forthry achieved through bliss, you achieved through despair.
Emet-Selch spirits the Crystal Exarch away to the depths of the Tempest, a region of the sea off the coast of Galusia. He invites you to come to him, that you might peacefully transform and cause the destruction of the First far beyond the reach and prying eyes of its people. You do follow him. With Reen's powers as the Oracle of Light, you are able to contain the light, prevent your transformation, for a time. There is no clear way of saving you, but at the very least, perhaps you can save the Exarch. Perhaps he'll be able to transport you away from this world, that the destruction might still be contained. What you find in the depths of the Tempest, though, is not what you were expecting. Deep below the sea, Emet-Selch has built a great monument to his nostalgia. He has used his creation magics to will an exact replica of Amarot into being. Not only the buildings, but the people. They aren't real, they're phantoms, NPCs he has created to remind himself of the world he's trying to bring back. But you're able to see this world. It's an incredibly striking moment, and a monument to Emet-Selch's inability to let go.
I may have gotten a little carried away in my attention to detail, added a few unnecessary flourishes.
The phantoms of this Amarot are all ignorant of the nature of the illusion, incapable of seeing the world for what it is. Trapped for an eternity in the day before Zodiark was summoned. Trapped on the eve of their final day. All but one, that is. The Phantom of Hythlodaeus, Emet-Selch's closest friend, is aware of his own nature, and the nature of the city, for reasons he does not fully understand. When you speak to the Phantom of Hythlodaeus, he speculates that perhaps a stray thought as Emet-Selch created the city was responsible for this. Hythlodaeus will realize the truth, or something like that. There's something so powerful about this. Emet-Selch's pining for the old days, his loneliness, is so overwhelming that he created an illusion. A living memory of his city, his family, his friends, at the bottom of the sea, just so he could remember them. As Hythlodaeus puts it, though he may carry himself with a certain glib ease, Emet-Selch is not a man to bear his burdens lightly. In fact, I imagine they have only grown heavier with every passing century. 'Tis a terrible weight he has chosen to carry. Emet-Selch says himself, The worst part of it all is that no one is left to remember Amarot. No one but him and his two unsundered comrades. Emet-Selch is motivated by being the only living testament to his world, to not let Amarot and the ancient Ossians be forgotten. We learn one more thing from Hythlodaeus before leaving him behind. You, the Warrior of Light, are not just any sundered soul. You are the sundered soul of one of Emet-Selch's former colleagues, Azem, a member of the Convocation of 14, the council who served as leaders of this ancient society. Emet-Selch recognizes you as this, as he lets slip earlier on, saying you wouldn't remember Amarot anymore. Finally, you confront Emet-Selch himself. You challenge him, his ancient dead paradise, against your fragile living world. I love Emet-Selch's frustration here. After everything you've learned, after seeing what he believes is proof that the world was once better and ought to be brought back to what it once was, you still have strength of your convictions.
How very, very heroic of you. In every single age, there is always someone who wants to stand up to the evil Ascians. Always the same arrogance, the same insistence that the world belongs to them, as if theirs were the only rightful claim, theirs the only existence worthy of preservation. Even now, after everything, you refuse to see reason. You think it unfair that you are subject to suffering? That your lives will be sacrificed for the ancients? Look at me! I have lived 1,000 of your lives. I have broken bread with you, fought with you, grown ill, grown old, sired children, and yes, welcomed death's sweet embrace. For eons have I measured your worth and found you wanting. Too weak and feeble-minded to serve as stewards of any star.
Emet-Selch is arguing that it's up to the older generation, in this case the Ossians, to evaluate those who come after, to determine whether they are worthy of inheriting and changing the world. Alphinaud responds with the much more pragmatic and, I think, valid view that it doesn't matter whether the next generation is worthy or not, they will be the ones to inherit the world. Pining for yesterday doesn't keep tomorrow from coming, no matter how hard you try.
Emet-Selch! We understand, truly, but it makes no difference. The ones you love are in the past, while ours are here in the present. One day, we too will be ashes and dust, but not today. Our time is not yet finished. We share your conviction, and that is why we will not abandon our course.
I've said before, part of the reason I love this game so much is that it often feels like the boss fights are genuine clashes of two different ideologies. That is absolutely the case here. The Scions and the Ossians are diametrically opposed. The Ossians follow a fundamentally regressive philosophy, yearning to return to the good old days, if you will. And the Scions follow a fundamentally progressive one. The Ossians are in denial of their legacy, of accepting what they've lost and letting the world move on. And the Scions are going to claim that legacy by force. When everything has been said and done, and there are no more words to share, the time for these two ideologies to clash has come.
You think us the same? You think your tattered soul of equal worth to those I lost? Then come. Earn your place. Prove yourselves worthy to inherit this star. Behold the coming oblivion. 'Twas the end of our era and the beginning of our great work. A fitting backdrop for your final judgment.
So you enter the final dungeon, which has you living through the final days of Amarat, seeing it fall firsthand, all narrated by Emet-Selch. Above Emet-Selch's memory of a dying world, you finally face him. Nothing you faced could ever have prepared you for his strength, however. One by one, your allies fall. At the worst moment possible, the light begins once more to burst from your chest. Reen tries to stop it, but Emet-Selch strikes her down. Just when all seems lost, an unlikely hero steps forward. Ardbert, the warrior of darkness who doomed the world.
If you had the strength to take another step, could you do it? Could you save our worlds?
See, he's not just anyone either. He's not just the fragment of some soul from the source. He's the fragment of your soul. He's your counterpart in the first, another fragment of the soul of Azem. This is what the voice of the mother foresaw. This is why she knew Ardbert could not sacrifice himself when the other warriors of darkness did. He chooses to merge his soul with yours, and in the process, gives you enough strength to contain the light. The Crystal Exarch calls upon heroes from other worlds, players like you, to stand against Emet-Selch. So, you face him as the final boss of Shadowbringers. Not, it's worth mentioning, under the name Emet-Selch, which was in fact his title, his role in the Convocation of 14, who all forsook their true names as a show of dedication to their positions as leaders and public servants. Now, he fights you under his true name.
I am Hades, he who shall awaken our brethren from their dark slumber.
It takes everything you and the Scions and your comrades from other worlds have, but eventually you are victorious. With Ardbert's strength added to your own, you are able to channel all of that excess light into a single attack, in the form of Ardbert's battle axe. You throw it at Hades and blow a hole right through him. After everything, Ardbert finally manages to save the world, even though no one he saved will ever know it. Later on, we get a clip of him finally reunited with the souls of his comrades, and his axe is no longer bloody, his armor no longer dark. His soul is finally able to move on. So, Emet-Selch stands defeated. His responsibility of remembering his people, of being his people's legacy, no longer his own to carry. With his final words, he acknowledges you and asks you to take this burden on instead.
Remember. Remember us. Remember that we once lived.
The worst thing, as he said before, was the way his people had been forgotten. Now he asks you to carry the torch and be his legacy. With a slight smile of acknowledgement, he is gone. He could never let go of his legacy, never accept that their time had come and gone. Now, in his final moment, he is doing so. He has been the one carrying their torch. He's been the only one left to remember them. And now he's passing it on to you. We've all lost someone. If you haven't, then you will. That is the way of the world. Shadowbringers is about coping with loss because it is about legacy. It's about coping with your own mortality and warning not to hold on too tight like Emet-Selch did. It's about learning that you cannot control how you will be remembered, or if you'll be remembered at all, and that all you can do is live the best life you can. It's about how we remember others. Where does our responsibility to the memory of the loved ones we've lost end, and asserting our own identities begin? I think good stories have something in them we can take with us when we walk away. Obviously, in a fantasy story, none of these choices are literally ones we'll have to face. I very much doubt anyone watching this video is ever going to be responsible for an army of angels eating 90% of the planet's population. However, these stories still hold emotional truths. We've all lost someone. How do we deal with that loss? Do we let it make us a monster like Emet-Selch does? Do we let it harden our hearts like Thancred? Do we get lost in our own grief and let it erode us down to nothing like Ardbert? Or do we let the memory of those we've lost drive us to be better people like Reen? Shadowbringers is my favorite expansion in Final Fantasy XIV. Shadowbringers is my favorite game in the entire Final Fantasy franchise overall, and it's a franchise I really like, which I consider myself a fan of. There are a lot of reasons for that, but perhaps above all else, it's the way it's stuck with me. There's something hauntingly, achingly beautiful about Shadowbringers, from the soundtrack to that ethereal light to the way the story portrays a melancholy world on its last dying gasps before oblivion. It makes me think about life, it makes me think about death, it makes me laugh, it makes me cry. It's a real artistic accomplishment. These characters, these stories have stuck with me. I carry them with me long after playing, and think about specific lines, specific moments, and specific emotions when I least expect it. What more can I ask from a game than that? Folks, I want to thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, please consider leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing. If you hated the video, I don't need to tell you to comment, you already have. Special thanks to my patrons and channel members who have given their real-life, hard-earned cash to help me keep making weird, overly sappy and emotional videos like this. The following people have pledged $5 a month or more to help me keep the lights on: Sir Darkon, David Duran, Alex Smith, Picayune, Alex Stewart, Hakan Boyam, Pete Lee, Jimbo Jovian, Nittend, Shiny Emptyhead, Lucas Craden, That's All, Alex, man, I'm really popular with the Alex demographic, Bell Mage, Malachi Murphy, and Dunio. In addition to getting your name read out at the end of videos, supporters also get access to special companion videos to the ones posted here on the main channel. The next companion video I'll be posting soon is going to cover the story of Yulmore, Vothri, and the Sin Eaters, who don't have much to say about Shadowbringers' central theme of legacy, but who are still the subject of a pretty neat story. If you're interested in seeing that, please consider going to patreon.com/Zuldim or signing up for a YouTube membership here. I've tried to make the two platforms have as many of the same perks as possible, so it's just a question of which platform you're more comfortable using. If you're still watching, then sincerely, thank you from the bottom of my heart. These Final Fantasy XIV videos are a lot of fun to make. I really love the story of the game, and I want to share my take on it with those who have played it before, and share why it's so special in the first place with those who aren't interested in playing an MMO at all. There will be more Final Fantasy XIV videos coming in the near future. Hopefully sooner than you think. I've got some big plans for FF14 content over the next year that I think is going to be really cool, albeit a little bit different from the videos I've already made on the subject. I feel like there's a bottomless well of cool stuff to talk about in Final Fantasy XIV, but Emet-Selch and Shadowbringers have been one of the big ones. I've actually been trying to write an Emet-Selch video for years. The very first draft of this video predates the Garlemald video I made in early 2022, my first FF14 video ever. So it feels really nice to have finally been able to get my words together and write down why it's so special to me. Until next time, thank you again. I'm Zuldem, and I hope to see you again soon.